It's like losing a child. The normal expectation is that your children will survive you. Here I have a business child that I'm outliving.
I felt like I lost my family. I mean, Circuit City was my family. I mean, all these people who are here, we were a team. We were, our vision, our dream was to see Circuit City as the nation's largest retailer of consumer electronics, and we thought that would never change.
It felt like you were losing one of your family members. And when I ride by a building and I see somebody else packaged in there, I just kind of look at it and I go, it just doesn't look right.
And I'm mostly disappointed for people that worked for Circuit City. 30,000 people in the end lost their jobs. People that had committed their lives to building Circuit City into one of the finest retail organizations in America were suddenly out on the street.
250,000 people's jobs were affected by the Circuit City closing.
Given its size, given its reach, it was certainly one of the biggest stories in town.
I'm standing outside of what was once Circuit City's flagship store. It opened 17 years ago, just across the street from the company's West End headquarters. Both closed this month, along with every single Circuit City store in the entire country, nearly 600 in all.
This company that we had, put our lives, our heart and soul into this company, just one day just disappeared.
Push it, click it, press it, flick it, tune it in, turn it on. This is what you watch it on. Any way you work it, integrate your circuit at the city. Circuit City. Come to the place you welcome. Technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. The future at your fingertips. Get all the right connections. Punch a key and you can see the new video directions. We can turn your car into an audio star. We're the one you want for the way you are. Come to the place you welcome. Technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. A gadget and a gizmo for electric machismo. Some amplitude for the radical dude. We're tuned into your attitude. Come to the place you welcome. Technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
And while he was there, they stayed with my mother's sister, who had married a Richmonder and had lived in Richmond for 20 years. Had a house on Park Avenue just below the boulevard. And they got along very well. And while they were there, my father had his hair cut.
Back then, the place to find out all the skinny on what was going on was the barber shop. And it just so happened that he got his hair cut in a barber shop only a couple of blocks from here, basically across the street, where you could see what was going on.
Park Avenue and Robinson. And the barber told him that the South's first television station was about to open in Richmond. Now, in fact, there were TV stations in Los Angeles and New York, but nobody in Richmond had ever seen TV, certainly not in Richmond, unless they traveled to New York or Los Angeles. And so a light bulb went off in his head, and he said, I think there's a big future for television. And I happen to know somebody in Long Island City, New York, that makes televisions. and maybe I should come down here and start a TV business selling TVs. And that's essentially what he did. Through my aunt and uncle, he met somebody, or he was introduced to somebody who had a tire recapping business in the 700 block of West Broad Street. The back of the stores, smelled like burning rubber all the time. He had the half of the front. There's some tires on one side, and he took the boxes. And he ordered a dozen TVs, which gave him the franchise for the whole state of Virginia. Unpacked them, turned the boxes upside down, and that was a display stand.
When I started the Ward's Company, and by the way, I think you ought to know where the name came from. We were not trying to find a partner named Montgomery, but we called it Ward's Company because Wurtzel is such a difficult name, especially on the telephone. And so I finally figured out a name that I thought would be easy and also much cheaper to make a sign with 5 letters than one with 7. I took the first letters of our names, of my family's names. W stands for Wurtzel, A for my son Alan, R for my wife Ruth, D for my son David, and the S was Sam. Now, a lot of people try to separate me from the company by putting an apostrophe between the D and the S. I resent that.
He didn't expect or attempt to bring in walk-in traffic. The way of obtaining business was to put a classified ad in the newspaper for a free home demonstration. And people would call in and make an appointment. The station was only on the air 4 hours a night, from 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock. All the rest was test pattern.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WTVR-TV.
People would call in, and he would try to schedule to drop off a TV set every hour, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and then come back the next night and either pick up the TV, because they had a one-day free home demonstration, or collect a contract to purchase the TV.
This is one of the Olympic TV models that Sam Wurtzel sold originally back in 1949. It was one of the very first sets that was sold by Ward's company.
My father was a very clever guy and a good marketer, and they made Olympic the biggest selling brand in Richmond for the first 2 or 3 years. It was a good set, but because it wasn't carried in the department stores or Sears, most of our clientele would be blue collar and African American, because we provided better credit opportunities.
The poor class people, they were the first ones to get television sets when television came to Richmond. You didn't see any television antennas out in the West End. No.
One hand washed the other. They needed us, and we certainly needed them, because we depended on lots and lots of televisions being out there for people to watch, and they depended on the people having something to watch.
WTVR was the only television station in those days. They could do anything they wanted to, And a guy by the name of Wilbur Havens owned it or operated it, and he dictated television in Richmond. Mostly in the early days, the pictures were not very good, especially if you had to get by with an inside rabbit ears antenna. They weren't real great.
The light bulb clicked on with the FCC, and they realized the towers have to get bigger if more and more people are going to get decent reception. The ink wasn't dry on the paper before Mr. Havens had people building our new tower right here on our property. When it went up, it was the tallest freestanding radio TV tower in the world. It is within about 10 feet of the size of the Eiffel Tower. They were big devices that drew a lot of electricity. They had huge power transformers in them. And especially back in the days of tube televisions, you didn't want to take the back off of a television set unless you knew what you were doing, because you could get a very large charge. Don't sit so close to the TV set, boys. Of course, there was the double whammy. You'll get radiation and it'll ruin your eyesight.
Well, the color TVs back then actually gave off X-rays, and you had to sit at least 6 feet away from the TVs or you would actually get a dose of X-rays. So there was truth to that, because they used a lot higher voltages in their cathode ray tubes back then. And a cathode ray tube driven at very, very high voltage is basically an X-ray tube.
But they actually built a little chair and bolted it to the floor of his panel truck between the two front seats for me to sit in, and I'd go on service calls with my dad when I was, a year or 2 years old. You couldn't do that now, but Mr. Wurtzel was fine with that. Sure, let him go. Put him in the car. Growing up as a very young kid with a father who was a TV repairman, we thought we were the most popular people in town. We were getting invited over places all the time, and it would end up, John, did you bring your toolbox? I'm having a problem with my TV.
The next strategic move, I would say, was to add white goods, refrigerators, washers, dryers. Throughout the country, there are a lot of white goods dealers that added TV. This is a case where a TV dealer added white goods, but they were a logical big ticket sale for home appliance, and then it was a logical marriage. And so he added Frigidaire, got a Frigidaire franchise, and opened a store on West Broad Street at 1806 next to what was then the biggest Sears store in the city.
A complaint is one of the few opportunities a customer gives you to make a friend.
When somebody complained, he bent over backwards to solve the problem and then send them away happy. So if something broke and you fixed it, his attitude was, well, that you did what was expected, but you didn't go the extra mile. But if you fixed it and gave them a free dinner at a local restaurant, or sent them a set of steak knives, or a set of hand towels or whatever, to say thank you, we apologize, sorry you had this problem, you would make a friend.
You're our customer. We're going to take care of you. We're going to see that you're happy and satisfied, regardless of what it takes.
He was a good guy. He was always helpful. He was always looking around for something that he could do to help somebody else.
A guy that would reach into his own pocket to pay the hospital bill of one of his employees.
Handsome, outgoing, friendly, exuberant. He was excited about everything.
Ward's really was not only the first independent television retailer in the area, but by far the most prominent. One of the things that was so important then was the training. By golly, everybody that worked on the floor at Ward's TV could tell you everything there was to know about each television on the floor.
What they did was sell up. We would advertise say a fill call television for $199. That was the leader. It was nailed to the floor. You didn't sell that. If you sold that, you were in trouble. Sam would tell the salesman how to sell, or the latest sales method, or whatever. Then they would have a sales meeting maybe 2 or 3 mornings a week, and he would get up and he would tell the guys exactly how to sell. If they followed his instructions, they couldn't fail.
You were talking to a television sales professional who had been trained by the factory, who had been trained by in-house people, and who had been trained by watching his peers that he worked with in the Ward store.
We're looking around for another, a growth strategy. And it was just at the time of the discount store revolution. It was a real revolution in American retailing between 1950 and 1960.
And he made moves to lease departments in various big stores around the country, and he also opened up additional dedicated Ward's TV stores.
Ward's TV opened up the first store of its kind here called the Carousel. And they sold, like I say, all types of merchandise, soft goods, hard goods, drugs, you name it. Like a Walmart was today. That was the beginning of stores of that type.
My dad came to me and said, look, we're now a public company. We're going to do some of these acquisitions. I need a lawyer on the staff. Do you know anybody, you have a classmate or a friend or something, who would be interested in doing this? Now, whether he had in mind me or not, I don't know, but I raised my hand and said, you know, if I could do it for 2 years, I'd be interested myself. I said I'd come down and be the general counsel for a couple of years. I'd learn business law on the job while we made these acquisitions, etc. And in 2 weeks discovered that the business was a lot more interesting than the law. Within a few months made a deal that when he was 65 he'd retire, and assuming I had learned the business I'd take over, and we went out and hired somebody else to be the lawyer.
Not all people were overjoyed because, one, they thought, this guy's a lawyer. What's a lawyer going to do in this company like that? Well, he fooled them all. He did a magnificent job, you know.
I remember having a store visit with Sam Wurtzel, and first thing he did when he met me at the front of the store was he wanted to go into the warehouse. He didn't want to talk to the people on the floor, he wanted to go in the warehouse, and we had one warehouse person in the warehouse at that time. He went back and he started talking to the warehouse associate, but he made him feel very comfortable and talked to him about his family, talked to him about, you know, what he liked about the job and all. I was astonished at that, but it taught me a lot about what this company was about.
So when I joined the company, it was, you know, it was doing okay. But what happened was a lot of these acquisitions that we made, these roll-ups, went south. We were much better at acquiring than we were at managing these independent companies around the country. I mean, the only acquisition we made that was really successful was Custom Hi-Fi. And that was primarily because Hi-Fi was such a hot category and we were able to integrate it in all of our outlets. But the companies we acquired in Norfolk and Indianapolis and Toledo, etc., turned out to be losers. By the time I took over, the company was in very bad shape. We sold a bunch of assets, we raised cash, we paid off the banks, we closed licensed departments. I mean, we went through what I call it a bankruptcy without the benefit of clergy.
Ward's company, who had just purchased a company by the name of Custom Hi-Fi, Dixie Hi-Fi, decided to get in the hi-fi business. Me being the guy that came out of the military knowing this stuff, they put me on the road. I went down to places in Tidewater like Ward's TV and actually had to try to train sales guys that had sold appliances all of their life, and you know, things like teaching the difference between a conical and an elliptical cartridge on a photograph. They didn't want anything to do with it.
If you combine the advantages of the warehouse showroom, showing people that we have a big inventory, implicitly you're saying we buy in bulk, we're getting it at a very good price. You show them a service department with technicians in white coats fixing things, looking very, I mean, they were professional, but we dressed it up to look professional. that it would give people confidence that if they bought something, you'd fix it, that if they bought something, you were getting it at a good price, and therefore you could sell it to them at a good price, and cut out the high-pressure selling and sold to people what they wanted, that you'd build a successful business. And so the first loading dock, which then became the superstore, was designed on that premise. And it turned out to be a big success. And that's how the superstore was born. I decided we needed to have a set of policies that were simple and easy to understand. And that if you asked any salesman in the store, what does Circuit City, or actually it's still then called Ward's Company, what does it stand for? He could tell you in 30 seconds. Savings, selection, service, and satisfaction. So service meant two things. It meant when you walk in the store, somebody would greet you. It also meant if you bought it, we'd fix it after the sale. Savings, we had the low price guarantee, and I don't think I invented that, but I certainly adapted it to our business. That if you could find the same item for less within 30 days after you purchased, we'd refund the difference, plus 10% of the difference. And the selection, the whole back wall of the store was nothing but TVs turned to the same channel. It was sort of mesmerizing, and it said to people, hey, we've got a huge selection.
We knew that if we executed those 4 S's, that our success would continue, customers would be happy.
And those 4 serve, pretty well even today. I mean, let's think about, especially the last 2, the service and the satisfaction piece. In a business like this, that's absolutely paramount to what you're doing, so that you're getting consumers serving as ambassadors for you, because they had a good experience, they're satisfied with it, and frankly, it gets them returning to the store as well.
And I went to an advertising agency and asked them to come up with some names, and they came up with Circuit City. And I thought that was a pretty good name. So we chose that, and we reopened in Washington, closed Dixie, closed Custom, and reopened the Circuit City, and it was a huge success. They were nice-looking stores, fully stocked with a wide range of TV, audio, and other electronics products, probably 10 or 12,000 square feet.
Circuit City in the 1970s was a great brand name because everything that we sold had integrated circuits in it. And it was all about, the name was cool, it was contemporary. Where the streets were paved with bargains was a play on the Circuit City and was a play on our low price image. So Circuit City opened the doors with a commitment to low prices. It opened the doors with a commitment to a broad selection. Great brands, all on display, everything hooked up so you could see it and test it. Those weren't common in all of the stores in that day. And then satisfaction, and the whole notion that if you bought something from Circuit City and you weren't happy, we would take care of you.
That the loading docks were starting to take off too. And the loading docks were everything a Circuit City store was, but also carried appliances. And I decided that the real growth vehicle was loading dock type stores, because they were 30,000 square feet, much bigger presence, and much more powerful.
That first Christmas, we were so busy in the store selling VCRs and televisions and stereo systems that I was really worried that in January there wouldn't be anybody coming in the store. I just thought everybody had bought something by then. It was so crowded on the sales floor, you would have to part customers to walk around the sales floor to go back to the customer you were waiting. It was a great company to work for. Everybody was very focused on having a great time, taking care of the customer, and we all made a lot of money and had a ball. There was a great deal of camaraderie and competitiveness as well.
There's something about sales that gives a real adrenaline rush. So I guess I never hunted a day in my life, but I think it's probably like hunting. You stalk your prey and you finally bag them. And in one case you got a deer, in the other case you got $150 in your pocket. Now, if you're an honest salesperson and you have qualified your customer and gotten them exactly what they need, they were going to buy the thing somewhere, okay? And you made it so that they bought them or bought the product from you. So you weren't doing anything horribly evil. You were helping the customer, being able to close that sale, and suddenly, you know, you've got a reward of $100, or you got a reward of $50. It was just a rush. If you did it right, you got a customer who respected you as an expert and who would come back to you, you know, month after month when they needed more stuff, and they'd come in specifically and ask for you.
I mean, I had customers who followed me from store to store when I moved from Charlotte to Asheville to Atlanta. I mean, which I find insane, by the way, but that's how important customer service is. That, you know, and I would tell them, look, I'll make a call. You know, you just go to your local store and get it. No, you know, I want you.
Alan cared about the business like his father. He cared about it as a family business, as an owner, but he was wise enough to see the need to develop an infrastructure in leadership to run the company as a major corporation.
The only long-term advantage we have is whether we can buy it better, advertise it better, price it better, service it better, deliver it better, and that requires people. And it requires people that can manage people to do that. So the most important thing in any organization is who are the people.
Alan had a vision for growing the company, but Danny and Bill and Walter operationalized that vision.
Walter Bruckhardt, who was a genius at merchandising and at massaging the manufacturers and keeping them, recognizing they had needs too.
When Bill ran the superstores, he was considered a tough but genuinely caring leader.
I mean, Bill Rivas hired into Circuit City as a salesperson, and he sold pots and pans door to door. That is a true story. Jim Gillum, same kind of story. Danny Rexner, same kind of story. So they started off as salespeople in the company, learned the company's, you know, what the company was about, how they wanted to treat people, how they wanted to grow people, how you had to develop people, how you had to train people. And they would in turn teach people that they brought on board, etc., and made them better.
The folks in the stores were extremely eager to perform, and I think it had a lot to do with how they felt about the company, how they felt they were valued, and I mean, it was really from the top.
These guys, they were Circuit City. They defined the policies, they defined the goals and the objectives.
I remember getting a visit by Danny Rexner. So here was a man that I had an unbelievable amount of respect for, who I thought was coming up, kicked me in the butt. Instead, he came up, patted me on the shoulder and says, "Jim, we had confidence in you when you got the job. We have confidence in you right now. You just need to have confidence in yourself and not worry about anything else." About a month later, I got a note, and things had turned around a little bit. I got a handwritten note from Danny, and it said, "I knew you could do it."
Alan was a terrific businessman. He believed that everybody could make a contribution. The most important thing was to get the right shaped peg into the right shaped hole.
Alan was absolutely the guy who saw the consolidation, single brand, the notion of how to build the superstore. Alan brought a guy in to put the first point of sale system in. His name was Rick Sharp, and Rick is legend in Circuit City and what he contributed.
I gave him a contract to design a system for Circuit City. I didn't think retailing is rocket science. You need to be smart. You need to like people and be able to work well with people. And you need to be dedicated and hardworking, have a long-term goal, and commit yourself with a lot of energy to accomplishing that goal. And I thought Rick had all of those characteristics. And so I approached him with the idea that he'd come and learn the business for actually, by then it was 4 years. And if he worked, I didn't promise him he'd be president, but I said, if you work out, you demonstrate that you have that capability, I'm going to step away. And that's exactly what happened.
The rest is, I guess, the history of Circuit City in the 1980s. We couldn't open them fast enough. They were unlike anything that was in the market.
Business was huge. The VCR was just absolutely out of control. We were selling them, ridiculous numbers of them. Anywhere from $400 was the cheapest one up to $1,200.
That was a lot of money coming in. And then there were extended warranties for $175, $225. There was just a lot of money to be made in VCRs. It was very important that our salespeople were trained enough to be able to actually be a sales counselor. They weren't a clerk. They weren't someone who was just going to take you over and ring you up. They were actually going to ask you the questions to find out the features and the product that you needed that would give you the best service.
And it wasn't a ask a question and let me go look that up for you type of thing. They knew everything and they could rattle it off, and they could tell you about their competitors' products.
One time our training department was looked at as not just the best in the industry, but one of the best in the world of training in the United States. What used to make our training sing was everybody realized how important it was because you had to make a trip to a particular place to get it. It was very event driven. It was also done in a very high quality manner. I mean, everybody that came was blown away by the quality of the instruction they got. And folks back at the stores believed in it and reinforced it.
We had a training program for our managers, and it was, again, so far ahead of the competition.
I remember getting this big, thick book. It was like 300 or 400 pages of how you managed a Wurtz Company store. And they said it would take 6 months. And I did everything during that 6 months from, I was a delivery person for 2 weeks, I was a warehouse person for 2 weeks, I was a cashier for 2 weeks. I sold on the floor in different departments for a month at a time, and I had to produce a certain amount of dollars. I had goals I had to meet.
Back then it felt like, you got these books and it felt like just a ton of work and you just really didn't want to do it. And then after you did it and you look back years later, you think, wow, I'm so glad I did it. There was so much valuable stuff that I still use today to teach others with, to teach myself with. It was a top-notch, first-class training department.
The intelligent choice was designed to keep the consumer focused on great service, low prices, great selection, savings, and speed. It's the intelligent choice. That was the insight. It was all about trying to give the consumer the best possible offer.
Circuit City, the intelligent choice.
If you were in a town where Circuit City operated stores, we were always in front of you with sale prices, air conditioning ads, car stereo ads, televisions, et cetera. And so from the standpoint of top of mind, we were a dominant player. When we came into a market, we ran frequently in the course of a year 500 pages of advertising in a newspaper.
One of the unique things about Sam Wurtzel was he believed from the day he opened the first door that this would be a billion-dollar business.
Rick's an extremely bright guy, one of the 2 or 3 smartest guys I've ever known in the business world. Very thoughtful guy with regard to strategy, technology, finance. I mean, just really knowledgeable across a broad range of topics.
When Rick walked in the room, everybody felt it. The energy, you didn't even have to see him there. You knew he was there because all of a sudden the tempo picked up.
Rick is outrageously entrepreneurial, high energy, extremely intelligent person, very good management style, very approachable.
Probably one of the most down-to-earth rich men I've ever met. But you always also got the feeling that he was intimately aware of what was going on in his stores at any given time. So he wasn't just a CEO. You understood that he knew where you were coming from if you talked about the challenge of dealing with a customer or trying to get product or getting managers trained. That period of time through his leadership was a really special period because a lot of the folks that reported to him demonstrated the exact same sort of qualities.
Patapsco is a subsidiary of Circuit City that develops and manufactures custom electronic equipment for Circuit City and other outside clients.
We had people writing operating systems, we had people writing applications, we had people building hardware specifically for Circuit City. And we were the best. Everybody in the industry knew us, and everybody knew that Circuit City systems were unparalleled.
The key to our success has been people. In the stores, we have the best trained and most helpful staffs around to assure knowledgeable, efficient, and friendly service for all our customers. After the sale, our service department employees do a job second to none. And we have employees in our offices, accounting, MIS, personnel, and elsewhere who do an outstanding job of keeping it all running smoothly.
There was a campaign that we called The Kid.
You bought it, Matt. You gotta handle it.
If you buy something at Circuit City, then see it advertised for less, just come back. Our low price guarantee means you'll get the difference.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Last week I bought this.
Plus 10% of the difference.
And today I saw this. Just open the paper and there it was.
It's that easy.
That's it?
That's it.
Cool.
The public loved those ads, and in fact, in all the research I saw through the last day I was with the company, that ad had recall among our core customer base.
Come to the place you're welcome, technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
He says, how are things going? And I said, well, Sam, truthfully, I've read this book, and it's talking about how the company, how great companies have always kept the power out at the store level. I said, I'm really afraid that we're hitting that tipping point where we're putting too much of the power in corporate. And he stopped me and he said, Don't let them fuck up my company.
And Best Buy, up until the late 80s, was a very small regional company. And in fact, in the late 80s, they had some difficulties, bait and switch, some legal problems. And it was kind of, for Best Buy, a heart attack. And it woke them up. And they made a decision to reinvent themselves. And when we opened the Midwest division, Best Buy had just introduced a new store format. They called it the Concept Store. And it was Concept One, and it was their first store of the format that led that resurrection, if you will, of Best Buy. Best Buy's marketing was unlike anything we'd been up against. It was very consumer-centric. We don't have commission sales counselors.
What we were expert at was training talented commission salespeople to be experts on the leading edge product. So in those days, in the early 90s, somebody like Best Buy, who had just started a warehouse-style concept, could not get the better quality goods when they first came out. Sony, Panasonic, Hitachi wouldn't sell their best goods to Best Buy because their view was Best Buy is no different than a Sam's or a Costco or a Walmart. All they want to do is discount the hell out of the product and sell a bunch of it. The consumer electronics business was so competitive that you made most of your money in the first 6 months of a new product when it was unique, when you had a competitive advantage, and that's why you needed someone who could explain to the consumer what the unique value proposition to them was. And the very best Circuit City salespeople did a great job of identifying what consumer need was and selling the person the right product.
I was training anywhere from 1,200 to 1,400 managers a year. So sometimes running 2 classes, week-long classes side by side at the same time. So we were running real fast.
In the last decade,
more than doubled in size,
every 3 years,
adding over 60 stores.
every year.
I thought after I left, we were growing too fast. We were too anxious to please Wall Street, and we would pick a number. We had to have 50 new stores or 40 new stores, and it wasn't always possible to find 40 or 50 good locations. It was a little too aggressive. I would rather do fewer stores in better locations and grow more slowly and more surely than ramp it up in order to hype the price of the stock.
The 1990s was a decade of Wall Street for Circuit City. We made decisions to protect our profitability. We were, I believe the statistic from 1979 to 1989, the #1 growth stock on the New York Exchange. And so when you came into the 90s, we had a track record of performing for Wall Street. And lots of decisions were made in the 90s to protect our profitability.
Well, when you go from average VCR selling for $500 to your average VCR selling for $60 and hardly anybody wanting a VCR, then a lot of the profit came out of the company. In order to remain as profitable as we were in the heyday of the 80s, we had to move 10 times more merchandise out the door to make the same amount of money. Electronics, with everybody getting into electronics, just wasn't as profitable.
The idea was not to diversify Circuit City, but to literally go out and act as a venture capitalist. What are the areas that are big? There's no point in going into a new business unless it's really large. What are the areas where no other big box retailer has staked out a claim? What are the areas where our competencies are particularly relevant? So our competencies were real estate selection, logistics, information systems, management of a complex, fairly highly paid sales force, finance that went along with the deal, and finally, look for an area where consumers were extremely dissatisfied. And that was one of the few times in my entire life I have truly had an aha moment, like the guy said used cars, and this picture formed in my mind about that's the perfect idea for what we're trying to do. And our proposal was, give us some money and we'll go build a couple of these, and that's how we'll learn whether it can be made to work or not. And the extraordinary board that we had at the time said, makes sense to us. And their view was, gee, we're not going to lose all of this. We're going to buy some real estate. If it doesn't work out, we'll get some of our money back. But if it does work out, this is the big idea.
CarMax, the new way to buy used cars.
Within 2 years, we should be the largest used car dealer in America, without question. And within 5 years, we should be the largest car dealer of any sort anywhere on the face of the earth. We believe that we will revolutionize this industry. It's 8 o'clock on the first evening. We are not officially open. Right. Our systems don't work. We don't have all our salespeople here. Our credit program is not working. The boss has gone home. And we are selling cars like they were going out of style. I have never seen so many people on one car lot in my life. We were financially independent, and from a management point of view, other than Rick and myself, we were allowed to, if you will, free ride on Circuit City's payroll and HR systems, but none of the Circuit City management played any role at CarMax. They were there to advise us, but none of them had to worry about CarMax as a day-to-day business. That's why we set it off-site. That's why we recruited a separate team. And after the first store or two, we pretty much had a rule that said you can't recruit from Circuit City.
There wasn't a lot of leadership from Circuit City that had been siphoned off or spending time working on CarMax. So I'm not so sure that that was something you could really point to as one of the ills that maybe started Circuit City down a road that they didn't want to go down.
If CarMax had been a failure right out of the chute, my sense is they might have said, okay, we need to stick to our knitting. Instead, it was a raging hit, and there was this, we can't do anything wrong kind of mentality. We have the Midas touch.
We had a bunch of cash, and Rick's belief was that the company wasn't going to grow unless we grew other businesses. And he made those bets. If you've ever watched Rick gamble, Rick gambles big and he gambles fast.
DivX was developed by Circuit City. We have made this investment not only because DivX is great for consumers, but also because Circuit City is the nation's leading retailer of value-added consumer electronics.
DivX is different than a VHS rental because the viewing period doesn't start when you leave the store. It begins when you insert the DivX disc and press play, so you can watch your movie tonight, next week, or even months later. Every DivX movie comes with a 2-day viewing period. During that time, you can watch it as often as you like. Reverse, fast forward, skip from scene to scene. And you're always free to pause at any time.
So let's go sell some DivX. Thanks.
DivX, which came along in 1996 roughly, was much more of an integrated business. Many people within the Circuit City business were directly involved in it. DivX product was sold primarily through Circuit City. So DivX was, I think, much more of a distraction, and unfortunately for Circuit City, pretty much of a distraction during those key years in the late 90s when Best Buy kept growing, looked like they were going broke in 97, didn't go broke, and then suddenly turned around. You know, it was difficult to have this other large, challenging, very complicated, very interesting and high potential business really integrated into Circuit Cities.
And I remember when Best Buy was having financial difficulties and everybody thought they were going under, so we were basically celebrating and we were all happy because Best Buy was pretty much a done deal. And I can remember it almost like it was yesterday. And so I think what happened to our mentality was we had won in our minds. We had won the battle, the war, the whole thing.
We'd been #1 for so long, and then Best Buy was coming into their own and become a formidable force, and then they were having their own organizational issues and were very close on the brink of closing.
We had been very aggressive with pricing on music, CDs, and we took our foot off of their neck, let the prices come up on CDs a little bit, and I think when Best Buy recovered from their inventory crisis and we took the pressure off of the profitability in music with them, we gave them a second wind.
In the early 90s, we were neck and neck. Each of us did 12 or 13 million, $14 million per store. By 2000, we were still doing 13 million. They were doing 40 million in an average store. There's no way that we could continue to be the leader. And once you're no longer the leader, then you don't get the best deals from the manufacturers. I think after I left, the philosophy was, if it doesn't have a decent margin, we don't want to carry it. So we had a much more limited assortment of computers, and certainly computer accessories than Best Buy. And they quickly went sailing past us in sales per store of computers and computer accessories, because they were not focused on margin, they were focused on sales. We didn't carry games for a long time because they were low margin. Best Buy carried the games, and not only did they make the sales, but more important, I think, the games became of great interest to an age group that we were not attracting.
You know, suddenly we were your father's Oldsmobile. I mean, we were the old stores, they were the new stores, not only in physical appearance, but in actually what we sold.
I knew we were in trouble when literally our goal one year was to just do better than Best Buy. We didn't have our own goal.
But during this period, right, I mean, there was a lot of reactionary stuff to what was going on over at Best Buy. And I think, you know, during some of this period, there was perhaps too much focus on them and not enough focus internally.
We misread Best Buy, and if we had it to do over again, Best Buy was a $500 million company in 1992. Circuit City was a $2.5 billion company. We should have just bought them and taken them off the map.
What if Divx goes out of business?
That's a fair question. But here's the bottom line. It's almost impossible to believe that Divx could go under.
Divx was a great idea, but it just could never have worked. It required the studios to pick a favored retailer, and the studios couldn't say we're going to support Circuit City, and that's what would have been needed in terms of releasing movies with the Divx encoded format and allowing Circuit City to be the proprietary reseller of that technology. But Divx was a huge cash drain. I think we spent $250 million on Divx in the mid-90s, $250 million.
He made those bets, and he won with CarMax, he lost with Divx, and ultimately it injured Circa.
I think Alan was much more of a Socratic leader, if I could say, which, you know, much more thoughtful, low-key, calming type of guy, where Rick was, you know, damn the torpedoes, it's full steam ahead.
He was a little bit more laid back.
I always got the feeling that Alan was more of a caretaker than a leader, that he knew how to kind of keep things the way they were, but didn't know how to take them to the next level. You know, that was when we started having a lot of management by latest slogan. You know, it's like one year we're going to Target, and the next year we're going to out Walmart. It didn't have that cohesive, this is where we're heading kind of thing. Now you could argue on, you know, in reverse that Rick had spent the money on CarMax and Divx, and hadn't upgraded the stores. So, you know, he may not have had as much to work with, and he still had that same pressure to deliver profit, profit, profit.
I mean, I never understood that decision. I don't think it was well reasoned. I don't think it was well studied. It was impulsive, and it was a serious mistake.
What if we exit the appliance business? We now have the square footage to go after the computer and packaged media business. And I had a conversation with a senior executive who told me we would be more profitable simply exiting the appliance business because the expense of all of the warehouses, all of the trucks, the distribution, the lost revenue because of damage to appliances, eliminating servicing for all those things. If you removed all of that expense and did nothing else, we would be more profitable.
Up till the last year we got out of major appliances, it was a profitable product to us every single year.
You know, it's funny, Lowe's and Home Depot and Best Buy all sell them, and Sears has sold them for a number of years. I'm thinking somebody's making a buck. Just saying.
We own like 12% of the major appliance business done across the country.
We were the number two player.
Number two player in major appliances. So we lost, not only we lost that revenue, but we also lost that clientele.
Because those products still needed to be sold, Circuit City in effect began sending former customers to their competitors. Because if my washing machine broke, I still had to buy one. And where I would have naturally gone to Circuit City, and maybe while I was there, I might have seen a television or an amplifier or a speaker that I liked as well. Now they weren't on the list of places that I went.
And getting rid of major appliances meant you got rid of the sales counselors who had the most experience in the store. So right there, you're eliminating the best salespeople on the floor.
I'm always looking for that little extra thing I can do to boost my sales.
We tried moving them to another, a lot of them we tried moving to another department or anything like it, moving a major appliance associate to computers. I mean, it's just, you know, they knew the major appliance business. They had customers that would come back 10 years later.
And we just took all the appliance area and we filled it with computer peripherals. There is no money in computer peripherals. When you're buying a DVD drive for $89, I don't know what's Circuit City making off of that, $6, whereas if you're buying a dishwasher, what are you making, 60, 70 bucks? And I think that was just one of the many bad decisions of management that sort of started us downhill.
One of the most important philosophies of selling at Circuit City is that we help educate our customers so that they can make a more informed buying decision.
Well, what were you known for? You were known for having the best trained salespeople in the industry, but you eliminated your training department. Totally.
Up till that point in January of 2001, every new sales counselor that came on board with the company got a minimum of a week's worth of training face-to-face with a stand-up trainer, learning selling skills and product knowledge. And that was dropped and was replaced with an e-learning program, internet-based training, that was frankly in its infancy and wasn't really very good. It was basically an information delivery system, for lack of a better description.
It's great for training facts, but you really need two people one-on-one where you can get immediate feedback on the behavior and do role plays to be able to learn how to sell well. That's just not something that you can do well sitting in front of a computer.
The training team really put the culture, particularly Sam Wurtzel's culture of taking care of the customer, really in people's, psyche beginning that first week, and that went away.
I have to say, at the end of the run, our training program was inferior, and it came at a time where we needed the training the most.
We're With You recognized that one of Circuit City's core strengths was passion, was loving consumer electronics, was talking to people with a sincere, I love this stuff, let me tell you why this is so cool.
We know how you feel, and that's why you can shop online and pick up at a nearby store the same day, or we'll ship to you. Circuit City, we're with you.
I think that went really well.
The most difficult part of the Circuit City offer was the commission sales force and the way commissions were structured, specifically the use of spiffs. You know, spiffs are an extra commission payment on some goods that you don't get on other goods. And the classic at Circuit City was, as somebody said once, if you go into Circuit City and say, I want to look at that Sony camcorder, the response of the salesperson is going to be, very good choice, sir. Let me show you this Hitachi.
Let me show you the latest technology from Hitachi. You're really going to like this one, Dennis.
Circuit City was the first to move away from the old, just throw you on the floor and sell you what I want to sell you model. But that underlying economic incentive made it a much tougher management challenge. There was always a question of should we evolve toward a hybrid structure that is sort of Best Buy, no commission on the simple stuff, and Circuit City, full commission on the other stuff.
I'm biased. You know, I was a commission salesperson. I know the motivation of commission salespeople, and so I believe that that's what we should have stayed with. However, Best Buy has been very successful with what they call a non-commission, but they just switched it to a team commission. So there are other ways to do it.
If you take the carrot off the stick, then all you got left is the stick. And that's not much of an incentive for a salesman to learn a lot about a product and to want to sell more.
I had that discussion with Alan McCall. I said, Alan, you know, if we're not paying them commission to sell better product, they're not going to.
In 2003, the retailer abandoned sales commissions in favor of hourly pay. Alan McCullough ran Circuit City back then and felt confident about his choice.
We have to make plans today to make sure we're in the right position that 5 and 10 years from now we have a great business.
But here for the first time, Circuit City cut their corporate headquarters staff. And after that, there was just a lack of desire and willingness to go the extra mile. It was such a disruption, and people just lost faith and lost trust, and they were like, hey, I could work here for 15 years and just get whacked because I'm a number, and nobody cares about what I do, and nobody cares about my contribution. And then when your leader gets up and says, this is the only time we'll ever do this in our history, and it's a sad day, and it'll never be repeated again until 12 months later we do it again. And then it became almost like an annual event.
You could tell when a layoff was coming. It's usually around the corner from the department that was going to be laid off. You would see boxes the night before and Kleenex boxes. And so you knew trouble was coming.
You know, these were very, very good friends that you watched their kids grow up, you know, and you had to say, I can't tell you why I'm letting you go. You know, as painful as it was for them, they got over it early and moved on. And it was those who had to relive it time and time and again that I think really suffered.
Apparently the street couldn't understand a company that not only sold electronics but also sold cars and was also a bank. And so that was very confusing to the street, and the belief was, well, if we got rid of these other things, they'd understand us completely and our stock would go up.
We were under the old model that people will come to us, so if we have a secondary location, it doesn't matter. We have a better offer. Well, A, we no longer had the better offer, and B, we were continuing to buy secondary real estate.
That was something that we had been doing for at least 15 years, putting our stores in the wrong places. And because we had such lousy real estate, customers weren't coming to shop with us.
Circuit City locked themselves into 30-year leases, and as the retail environment in the area that they had their stores got older and older, and the retail business went further and further out into the suburbs, Circuit City was stuck in old dingy buildings.
We would go to real estate meetings. We would, why don't we take this location? I mean, this is an A location, and instead we would lose the deal. Guess who got the deal? Best Buy got the deal.
I was the camcorder buyer for about a year and a half. The camcorder display in the vast majority of our stores was large enough to display 60 camcorders. Our assortment was 24.
Because things have changed so much over the years.
But it was a disaster trying to make any change for something like that. So customers would walk in and you're looking at this huge display, with 10 pieces of equipment on it. And if I'm a customer, I'm thinking, these guys going out of business? And this is, 10 years before.
All the merchants in the 80s and all worked in the stores.
We had a period where our guys were just aggressively offending manufacturers, calling them names, refusing to deal with them, treating them badly.
You could always get an appointment with their competitor with just a phone call, and sometimes it would take weeks or months to do the same thing with Circuit City, which was very frustrating.
Face it, you're a Verizon house, you can't have iPhone. The biggest consumer electronics product in the last, 4 years or whatever it is, we can't play. I mean, that's insane.
It was Circuit City having for you just what you needed to get the experience out of your consumer electronics that you were looking for.
Circuit City.
If this guy's from Best Buy and Best Buy's doing great, then we had great hopes for Phil when he came on board.
We brought in a lot of consultants. We focused heavily on innovations and ways to modify the business. These were all things that Best Buy did a decade earlier.
We used to joke about it being the corporate ADD. What's it going to be this, So we went through a lot of initiatives in a very short period of time.
What I think happened after Rick Sharp retired, we started grasping for straws. We were looking for silver bullets. We were looking, if we just remodel the stores, and we started down the path of spending a bunch of money for remodeling the stores. If we just change the way we sell, if we change this, if we change the way we advertise, that'll solve the problem. We were grasping at straws without stepping back and saying, look, where do we stand in this market? And what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? I mean, they did strategic planning, but they did it mechanically and not thoughtfully, I'd say. And some of it was window dressing for the board, because there were things in the strategic plan they knew weren't true, but they wanted the board to believe otherwise. I mean, that's when you start fooling yourself and fooling the board, that's another indication that the company is in bad shape.
They came in and took over the point of sale system. They offered a data warehouse solution. They took over our infrastructure, and the numbers I was running were not showing that that was a cost-effective solution. I tried to get rid of some of our consultant partners because they were horrible. At one point, I got livid in my boss's office, and I think I scared him. I think he never saw that side of me, but as I kind of asked him if we were a crack whore or maybe a battered wife or something, that we kept going back to the same person over and over again, and all they did was disappoint us.
Well over $1 billion was spent between IT and consulting in the last few years of the business. And if you think about the amount that took us down, we would still be in business if we had perhaps spent a little bit less bullishly.
support from Circuit City's Fire Dog. Because nowadays, remembering that the batteries are not included just isn't enough. Simple to shop, buy, and enjoy. Circuit City. Simplicity guaranteed.
Burning all your cash on stock buyback to inflate your stock price didn't seem to be such a brilliant idea at the end, because then we ran out of cash.
Last month, you brought the company's share price to our 5-year high. At $31.29, you should be pretty proud of yourself.
2 years later, when your stock is under $1, all of a sudden that stock buyback at 20 doesn't look so smart.
At just the wrong time, they bought back a bunch of stock just before the yogurt hit the fan, if you will, with the worst economic downturn in 80 years.
We didn't have enough money to change our store format and move to better real estate, but we had enough money to buy back our stock.
Management laid off 3,400 in-store employees, only to offer them their jobs back for less pay.
And it was certainly a mistake, foolish in the extreme, I would say, to fire the high-priced ones and turn around and say, well, we'll hire you back if you work for less. And when you turn around and kick people in the teeth like that, there's no way you're going to maintain morale. And that was just, I don't think that was the cause of its demise. It was just another nail in the coffin.
That was sort of a recipe for disaster.
I think it was a huge piece of the decline. I mean, I really do. And not just because of the action, but how it was communicated out, how it seemed to be very reactive and sort of very short-term focused.
Our CEO was worst CEO of the year, and there was no action taken on behalf of the shareholders until it was literally too late. And by the time Jim came in, Markham came in, it was all but done.
We want to thank you very much as we move into this holiday season for your efforts. And just remember one thing, these are our stores, these are our customers, and let's make this happen.
I was put responsible for putting the team and the plan together to shut down stores, like to the tune of 150. So the surprise for me was putting that together and then finding out the 3 days before we filed Chapter 11 that my services were no longer needed in the company. That was pretty devastating. That was a big surprise.
Basically, an HR person would come walking down the aisle in between the cubes, and then they'd point to you, and you would go in your manager's office. You'd be given your walking papers and a box, and you'd walk back to the cube, you pack it up, and you'd be escorted by security or by another employee that was designated out the front door. And as part of those papers that you signed that you would not talk to the media or you would lose your severance package. And so that's why people coming out the front door would not talk to the Channel 6 or Channel 12 crews that were parked out front, because people didn't want to lose their severance. And I remember one of the women that was given pointed at, screamed and yelled, "How am I going to feed my babies?" It was awful.
Well, a lot of my friends and people that I knew worked at the corporate headquarters, worked in the stores here, and you would see now on Facebook, as the company was kind of falling apart, people would be commenting about how it was a nightmare to be in the building and how they're calling people in one by one, and it was, I think it just brought a dark cloud over the city.
for the Christmas of '08, when the world was falling apart and Lehman Brothers was going out of business and their credit was tightening dramatically, the suppliers got nervous.
Whereas in any normal circumstance, you would have expected the vendors to continue to help Circuit City make it through tough times. In 2009, Sony was worried about Sony, Panasonic was worried about Panasonic, HP was worried about HP.
The shelves were empty because we couldn't get goods, and that's when they decided they had to file for bankruptcy.
At that point in time, I was glad I was no longer a buyer, because the buyers just had it was brutal trying to deal with the vendors, begging for product and then not taking their calls when we weren't paying.
And then a couple weeks later, the banks cut our credit line and whoop, the money's gone, and now we're filing for bankruptcy because there's no better way.
While words like bankruptcy in Chapter 11 may sound very scary, let me begin by saying that this does not mean that Circuit City is going out of business.
There was a spin to it that made us all believe that was really the best thing for them, that declaring bankruptcy allowed them to get their affairs in order to turn the company around.
I found the people at the very end to be almost identical to the people at the very beginning in terms of their passion for wanting the company to be successful.
Listen, we have become the underdog, and we can make that work for us. Being the underdog gives us the opportunity to show just what we're made of. And when you're the underdog, a lot of other people start pulling for you. We're a major distribution channel, we play a strong role in our communities, and we employ more than 30,000 great associates. We don't intend to go anywhere but up.
You have to keep making the donuts. I mean, you just in case, you have to keep doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you're contributing to it, So there was this combination of, all right, have we got this assortment plan? Then, by the way, how's your resume?
As soon as we declared bankruptcy, my belief was our only savior was some sort of white knight to come in and buy us.
If somebody with deep enough pockets had done that, I felt like we might have had a shot. Plus, you don't have to, report to Wall Street every quarter. Here's what we're doing. Please don't shoot us.
Sometimes you can, through bankruptcy, reorganize and get debtor in possession lending, but that didn't. People lost confidence in the company, in its management, in its plans, in its ability to recover.
The creditors pushed for a solution. The creditors probably had zero faith that there was going to be a good solution, so they figured better to cut their losses and get what they can and move on. Because let's face it, we were losing money for many, many years. Now, if you can't get it right after 5, 6, 7 years, what makes you think all of a sudden, because you're in bankruptcy, you're going to get it right?
I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach.
It felt like a funeral.
Oh, I was devastated.
Couldn't believe it happened.
Yeah.
It was, we really didn't think it was going to happen.
I think the saddest thing is that Richmond lost, a great company, and I don't think it'll ever be replaced. So that's a sad thing for the city of Richmond.
It was 34,000 direct jobs. But think about everyone from a toilet paper vendor, JP Morgan Chase, who was our credit vendor, all those people supporting us lost their jobs.
The regional offices that supported the stores and the vendors, and then the restaurants and all just the little businesses that were in existence around these big places. And then families, it was 250,000 people.
What hit me was that my friends were losing their jobs. That what has been a huge part of my past was gone. Every piece of work that I did, it wasn't going to go anywhere. Nobody bought it. Nobody was taking it. It was literally, could have been put in a pile and set on fire, basically, because it just it meant nothing.
It was almost to me, it was kind of a relief. The sick patient is dead. You tried and tried and tried, but the patient was sick in many, many ways. Its culture was broken, its brain was broken, its confidence and trust was broken. It didn't have a will anymore.
The sad truth is there wasn't a shoebox full of jobs that these folks could just slide into using the same skill sets and expecting the same compensation that they had made at Circuit City.
A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people lost the identity of Circuit City, and that's a whole lot worse than the amount of money that we've got, stuck in bankruptcy court right now. So.
The fundamental problem with Circuit City is we got complacent. And we thought we knew the answers, and we thought we understood the customer. And we got complacent. And that was a mistake. Never think you know the answers. Always run scared.
Never stop being paranoid. Focus on your competitors and think the worst about them.
Because they were not successful in communicating a narrow set of values to a variety of stakeholders, that was really what spelled the failure in the end. People simply didn't know what they were all about. And they sort of lost track of where they were headed and how they might get there.
Don't forget what got you there. It was your customers and your people. Nobody else.
The people that I worked with were just fantastic. Circuit City had the ability to hire some of the very best in the industry. And unfortunately, I think the lesson to be learned with Circuit City is that the wrong people at the top can actually destroy a company.
And they turned their backs on the people, I think, which is really sad, because the people are what made Circuit City great. Not only the employees, but the customers as well.
At the end of the day, it is about the people. People make the difference.
Circuit City has, throughout its entire life, been an entrepreneurial company, more entrepreneurial than most. Sam Wurtzel was a classic small-scale entrepreneur. His son Alan, who came in and really invented the modern electronics retailing business, the first big box electronics concept, was a really driven entrepreneur. He went completely out of the box when he recruited Rick Sharp, who was really a computer entrepreneur who'd already been successful and retired with tens of millions of dollars before he was 30 years old, to come in and be the CEO in training, if you will, of a retail company. And Rick continued that pattern by recruiting folks like me, who I had run a restaurant business in Marriott, wanted to do more entrepreneurial stuff.
I mean, CarMax was a brilliant conception, and it's still a brilliant business. It took the principles that Circuit City had: savings, selection, service, satisfaction, and applied it to another very difficult, even I would say more difficult business.
I think that's really the legacy of Circuit City, is a great entrepreneurial culture.
I really owe my livelihood and my success and the livelihood of my children and their success to Circuit City.
We remember all those good things, we remember all the tough things, and we learn, and the experiences that we learned from. We learned a lot. I mean, it's helped grow me. It's helped me and my family be able to be independent.
Who would have thought we would have ever started from Ward's company and then built Circuit City and CarMax and affected the millions of people that we did. So I'm grateful.
We got to change people's lives.
It was awesome. I loved it. You know, I look back now and I'm still very grateful. When I drive by a building and I see it, I have fond memories. I'm sorry that it's gone.
Camcorders and cameras and printers and PCs. Those are the things that, those are the toys in my life that I really enjoy, and I enjoyed sharing with other people my passion for them. And so it wasn't just a job, it was something that I really enjoyed, because I think they say that, do something that you enjoy and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, working at Circuit City was a lot like that.
There are other stores that will go away. I don't think any of them will ever be as great as Circuit City was. There won't be as big a fall for anybody else. I hope they learned something.
Push it, click it, press it, flick it, tune it in, turn it on. This is what you watch it on. Any way you work it, integrate your circuit at the city. Circuit City.
Come to the place you're welcome. Technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
The future at your fingertips with all the right connections. Punch a key and you can see the new video directions. We can turn your car into an audio star. We're the one you want for the way you are.
At Circuit City, trained sales counselors are one of the reasons we get higher customer satisfaction ratings than any other specialty home electronics and appliance chain.
A gadget and a gizmo for electric machismo. Some amplitude for the radical dude. We're tuned into your attitude.
Come to the place you're welcome. Technology with a heart. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art. Welcome to Circuit City, where service is
Thank you for shopping Circuit City.
Thank you for shopping at Circuit City.
Thank you for shopping at Circuit City.